The September 9, 2019 work session of the Williamsburg City Council will come to order. Ms. Burcham, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Maslin.
Here.
Ms. Ramsey.
Here.
Mayor Freiling.
Here.
Vice Mayor Pons.
Here.
Mr. Zhang.
Here.
Next item on our agenda are items for City Council meeting of September 12th. Mr. Trivette, what would you like to highlight?
We have we have a total of 5 public hearings, but 3 of them have to do with adding the definition for a private plaza in the B1 district, and then 2 requests from Colonial Williamsburg Foundation for installing such a private plaza on a parking lot known as P3 that they have requested to table. Then we have the consideration of a request to appeal the decision of the ARB board for the demolition of the Buck Trout Cottage in the Historic District. And then the final one is a revision to the food truck ordinance having to deal with where a truck has to be registered and pay meals tax. From there, under new business, we have consideration of 2 items of application for tourism promotion contingency, and then we'll conclude the day with a approval of a resolution applying for revenue sharing funds from VDOT.
Questions for Mr. Trivette?
Can I just clarifying point, in terms of Thursday, you mentioned that there was a request by the applicant to table, and that would actually require us to make a motion to table and to vote on it. There's also still a public hearing that allows citizens to be able to speak on the topic, even though we may not be approving or denying it on Thursday, right?
The first item on the agenda that day, the first public hearing, is to add the definition for a private plaza to that particular zoning district. And if the council proceeds with that item, there would be an official public hearing, which would give the opportunity for the public to speak.
Understood. Thank you.
And there's an opportunity today as well if anybody wanted to speak at it during the open forum.
Other questions? No? Okay, this takes us to the public comment, and this is the time for anybody who would like to address council about any of the matters that we will be discussing at our Thursday meeting. You're welcome to come forward and share your thoughts. I have several speakers cards, some of which may or may not apply to Thursday's meeting. At the end of this meeting, we will also have open forum when we'd welcome anybody to come up and talk about any topic that's of interest to you. So I'm going to start with the speakers cards. If you want to wait till open forum, I'm guessing you won't, but if you want to wait till open forum, that's your prerogative. So the first is Terry Gilly. And if for everybody who comes forward, if you could give us your name, address, and keep your remarks to 5 minutes or less, we would appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, members of City Council. I'm Terry Gilly. I work for a company called Colonial Connections. We're located at 1001A Richmond Road, Suite 1W. I'm here today representing the Historic Triangle Group Tour Coalition. That's comprised of 3 area companies, ourselves, World Strides, which is the largest educational travel company in the country, and School Tours of America. Our companies assist groups visiting our area with their arrangements for air and ground transportation, accommodations, admissions, guided tours, and group meals. We work hard to be good stewards and partners with our area attractions, hotels, and restaurants. Our companies attend travel industry-related trade shows to bring business to our area, and we help thousands of group travelers have memorable and rewarding visits to the Historic Triangle. Collectively, we purchase 40,000 student admissions to Colonial Williamsburg each year, in addition to many tavern meals and Colonial Williamsburg evening programs. Excuse me. We are here today to bring to your attention the economic and safety issues facing our destination. The closing of Nassau Street between Francis Street and Newport Avenue for motor coach loading and unloading affects every tour company that packages our area and every group they bring to our doorstep. Without a designated loading and unloading area that can accommodate multiple coaches near Merchant Square, a negative message is being sent that groups are not welcome, needed, or wanted. The Historic Triangle already struggles to maintain market share for group travel, and any unfriendly practices or policies risk fewer tour groups and fewer hotel nights, which result in lower tax revenues. Most destinations welcome group tours with open arms. They treat them with respect, kindness, and appreciation. Most tourism destinations are happy to make reasonable concessions to this market segment because they bring tax dollars and eliminate additional vehicles on the roadways. The historic Triangle has one of the most important stories to tell in our American history. But sadly, we seem determined to undermine ourselves and insist on making it cumbersome for groups to book and navigate our area. There is too much other destination competition: Gettysburg, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., our neighbors in Norfolk and Virginia Beach, for us not to work hard to keep our current share of the group travel market and to work to increase this segment instead of working to decrease it. I can assure you that our competing destinations are hoping that Nassau Street stays closed, and better than that, they hope that no one has the vision to fix this already strained group dilemma. The economic impact on the square's merchants will start to be felt as early as this fall on a much larger scale in spring of 2020. Once groups become disenfranchised with the lack of concern for their safety and well-being, the impact of this decision will also be felt by our hotels, restaurants, and other attractions as we move forward towards self-destruction. As a company, we do not support non-ticketed groups, but keep in mind that even a non-ticketed group that shops and dines at Merchant Square generates tax revenue. According to an economic impact study by John Dunham and Associates that was commissioned by the American Bus Association, our area served approximately 237,000 motor coach passengers with an overall economic impact of $98 million in 2016. Of even greater concern is the safety of the many school groups that visit here. It's not uncommon for as many as 30 motor coaches to be staged for loading and unloading at the same time. Colonial Williamsburg's attempt to replace group loading and unloading on Nassau Street with a 3-coach bus stop at South Henry Street is just not adequate. Please understand, we are not talking about motor coach parking. That is available at Colonial Williamsburg's Group Arrivals Building and at the Williamsburg Area Transit Authority. We are talking strictly about loading and unloading. This process can take as few as 3 minutes and as many as 15 by the time a group has collected their personal items, distributed bottled water, divided into smaller groups, and head counts have been completed. Group loading and unloading is not like individuals catching the city bus that pulls over, loads, and pulls off. A school group has a lead teacher who is responsible for making sure all of his or her students and adult chaperones are present and accounted for, that the sick child receives medical attention, and prescribed medications are distributed. While many school groups are able to travel on one coach, there are as many that travel on multiple coaches. As a responsible group travel destination, it's imperative that we provide a designated, safe, convenient, user-friendly, and ADA-compliant group loading and unloading area near Merchant Square that can accommodate a minimum of 15 to 20 motor coaches staged simultaneously, in addition to the 3-bus stop on South Henry Street. We know the issue of designated group loading and unloading has been discussed multiple times and in multiple meetings without resolution. We also know that none of us have been asked for our opinion or advice. Decisions like these should not be made in a vacuum without input from the entities that work in this industry day in and day out. We are not only representing ourselves today, but every tour operator and school group that travels to our area who are unaware of this change and the impact it will have on their groups. This issue is not going away, and unless we act to resolve it in a timely manner, our area will suffer the consequences of an apathetic decision supported by an apathetic tourism industry.
Ms. Gilly, if you
Yes.
wouldn't mind concluding, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. In summary, we respectfully ask council to work with us and other stakeholders to identify a resolution to this unsafe and unfriendly circumstance regarding the motor coach loading and unloading area for group tours. We're known for hospitality, and we would like to keep that reputation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker's card I have is Lois Montague.
Hello, my name is Lois Montague. I live at 309 Lewis Burwell Place in the Village at Quarter Path, which is, the community is directly across the street from the Quarter Path Recreation Center. I would like to voice my objection to building the new multi-use sports complex at the current location of the Quarter Path Recreation Center. The Village at Quarter Path is a quiet homeowners community of 120 townhomes and 6 single-family homes. The Village at Quarter Path will no longer be a quiet community if the new proposed complex is built at this location. With a capacity of several thousand people and parking for 1,100 plus cars, our quality of life will be greatly diminished if not destroyed. Think back to going to an event with several thousand people. At the end, you're all walking to your cars, you're talking, you're laughing, opening car doors, closing car doors, starting your car, pulling out and waiting to exit the parking lot. Imagine the noise from 1,100 cars doing this at the same time. Once you exit from this new facility onto the 2-lane road, you have to wait to turn onto another 2-lane road, and then you're able to go home. Imagine living across the street from this and having noise from this for all events. I'm not sure you would want to live there. Think of the residents who will possibly have trouble doing everyday activities when an event is beginning or ending. Think of having trouble getting out of the neighborhood to go grocery shopping or a doctor's appointment. Think about having trouble getting home after going out to dinner or the movies. No resident should have those problems. We should not have to plan our lives around a sporting event. Think of worst-case scenario and someone needs a first responder. Will fire, police, or an ambulance be able to get in if there's that much traffic? I don't know if the sports complex is needed or just something that some people want. I don't know if it will increase patronage at hotels or restaurants, but I do know that the proposed location is the wrong location. Tourism is vital to this area, but it shouldn't be more important than the lives and well-being of property-owning residents. We are here 12 months a year paying taxes, shopping in the area, and using all of the amenities. Along with the feasibility studies you will do, I hope one will be a study of what will happen to our property values if this complex is built at the proposed location. I would like the city to inform all the homeowners of that study. We deserve consideration. I saw an article in the newspaper about a community in California that is signing a petition to stop a Costco from being built there. They cited problems with congestion, traffic, noise, and generally diminished quality of life for the residents. The Costco was going to be 142,000 square feet. The proposed sports complex is 168,000 to 200,000 square feet. You want to build a facility larger than a Costco on a 2-lane street across from a community of 126 homeowners. Please think about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Montague. I have 2 cards from Susan Gennaro. Do you want to speak on both issues or keep one till later? Come on up. Okay, or you can come back at open forum.
Susan Gennaro, 220 Surrey Drive, Brandywine. Issue number 1 is the Neighborhood Balance Committee. I applaud Williamsburg for setting up a Neighborhood Balance Committee. Of course, it's important for this college town or any college town to study the effects of increasing non-owner occupied homes. It would change, of course, the character of communities if absentee owners are renting out more property and there are fewer stakeholders that are on site to keep and advocate for the character of the community and the community at large. However, the Neighborhood Balance Committee, as I understand it, has members that the names of which will not be released to us, and the public allegedly will not be allowed to monitor the meetings. I'm wondering if this is a violation of the Virginia Sunshine Laws for open meetings. Issue number 2, Capitol Landing Road. I live in Brandywine off of Capitol Landing Road, and we are looking forward to the new streetscape being built and economic development along the roadway in keeping with the culinary district theme. It will affect our property values and our quality of life positively. We were looking forward to the demolition of the DMV, which was to take place this autumn, and then not long after to have the streetscape reconstruction begin at some point in the near future. Now I am told that there is some unknown hang-up or delay by VDOT. It is not known what the problem is or how long it will go on. Of course, we've waited very long. for Capitol Landing to become a vibrant streetscape within our community that we know it can be. And I'd like it clarified about what the problem is and what it can be done to solve it and how long that will take. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gennaro. Dr. Cranbuell?
David Cranbuell, 201 Harrison Avenue. I haven't been here in a while. That should say something about how important this is. I think that this proposal to build a green space right next to Duke of Gloucester is fantastic, and I think it's the most important thing I've heard since I've been here in terms of our future development. It totally fits into everything the architects and the consultants said we should be doing. Now, I understand one issue is parking. I have taken the time, every time I go to the bank, every time I walk downtown, drive to the bank, or walk downtown, to look at the parking on North Boundary. Every day, every time, 3 to 5 empty spaces, as close as parking in the middle of that parking lot. There is no parking problem, as the 4-year-old study, which of course we had delayed for all kinds of obvious reasons, said. What it needed was a more efficient operation. And I'm here to give a huge compliment to Andrew and his team, because with proper enforcement and with what they've done with that parking garage, this is a piece of cake. Now, I don't know, we need perhaps to make it clearer and easier and more widespread how easy it is to simply load. All you have to do is, even I can figure this out now, Williamsburg VA.gov/parking, and then it explains it, and then you hit the button there, and you just enter your name and your license plate numbers and a credit card, and all you do is drive in and drive out. It is unbelievably efficient and easy. There is no parking problem. So then the question is, what is an issue for not voting for it? I'm not aware of any, unless you just want everything to be the way it's always been. So I will be trying to reach out to city council members to find out what they're hearing that is a viable reason, since parking is not the issue. Finally, something very important. We cannot operate with 4 voting city council members. We cannot operate with the 2 largest employers having to abstain themselves from voting on absolutely some of the most important issues affecting our cities. The government in Richmond allows people to simply divulge a potential conflict of interest. I would like to suggest that, working with our city attorney, we come up with some comprehensive system where you're allowed to swear that something that you could actually go to jail for if you violate it, that you do not foresee any financial or power benefits from voting. I cannot see how we can function effectively as a city with people who work for the College of Women Mary, the thousands of people, and the many, many people who work for the foundation, particularly when you see somebody who's working on fundraising that has nothing to do with a totally separate entity with a separate tax number abstaining from voting. That's unacceptable. It's dysfunctional. We can't have that. And so I hope the city council will work with our lovely and very hard-working mayor to make it clear that it's totally functional and appropriate and necessary for him to vote and take whatever necessary steps are legal to make it clear he has absolutely, unequivocally, no benefit that could possibly be created by voting on this issue. And then he just has to deal with those who like how he voted and obviously those who don't. But we need 5 voting members, and when the election comes in the spring, we need to make it clear that whoever runs, whoever they work for, they have the same process. And now we have a month to solve this problem, and I'd like to see it solved. Of course, I hope the whole thing's unanimous anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cranbuell. Would anybody else like to address council regarding Mr. Murray, please?
Murray, 703 Goodwin Street. I just have a question there about the Tourism Promotion Contingency Fund. I guess on Thursday's agenda, we're going to be, I guess, discussing giving $25,000 from the Tourism Promotion Contingency Fund to William Mary Global Film Festival. I guess my question is, if we give them $25,000 from I guess that's the TDF. That is not the TDF? Tourism Promotional Fund? Okay,
It's a separate operating fund in the city's budget.
okay. Well, are they supposed to, as part of their plan to come up with, is that, are they getting $25,000 worth of business to the city of Williamsburg, or is this just like a fund that's given to some agencies there, and we don't care about the payback? That's the question I have there.
And we will answer that on Thursday during that program, and it's a valid question.
Okay.
We will address it then.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. Anybody else like to address council? Mr. Spangler?
Ron Spangler, Bayberry Lane, and I want to thank all of you up there for allowing me to visit with you over the past week. Unlike the good doctor, I represent a number of people that are not for the current proposal for the City Council for the Goodwin Plaza. There are plenty of parking spaces around the city, I would agree with the doctor there, but the quality of those lots are deplorable. And I think there's some notions to correct that. One of the, I'll be speaking Thursday in more detail, but one of the things I would wish you consider is to also table the definition of private plaza as well. And I believe in green space. I've learned of the vibrancy initiatives and so on to extend towards the triangle, and I'm all for that. But I would just wish that you do consider tabling also that private plaza portion of the CW request. Unfortunately, CW has a horrible public relations issue with many locals around the city and in the county, and I think if working together with you and them, as well as the vibrancy initiative, we could all work this out. Somewhere in the middle is usually the right answer, but I do agree with the doctor that there's a lot of parking, and there's a number of ways to make it even better for the citizens and more importantly the visitors that spend money here to generate revenue to improve our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spangler. Would anybody else like to address council? Mr. Chauhan?
Good afternoon, Mayor and members of City Council. Mickey Chauhan, 129 Berkeley Lane. I wanted to take this opportunity because it's been some time and it's really long overdue, but I operate a business on 2nd Street, and the enhancements by the underground wiring has been greatly appreciated due to yourselves and members of council before you. And the improvement down there is enjoyable every day when I turn the corner to round the corner onto 2nd Street. And it's anything that you can do to enhance the streetscape is always going to be appreciated. The same thing happened up in the Walnut Hills neighborhood, and that was a different project that was not funded through the city, but it was a VDOT and a State of Virginia and Dominion Power project, which also happened in Highland Park. And both those projects have been immeasurable, the impact and the beauty that it's resonated in the neighborhood. I did want to bring to your attention, there's another problem on Francis Street. I know that was talked earlier about the bus tour group business, which I do agree that needs to be addressed with. I frequently travel that road back and forth from home to work a couple times a day. That is an issue that needs to be handled and looked at, but probably something that's even more pedestrian dangerous and needs some attention. And I encourage each one of you members to travel that road at night, especially on a rainy night. But the crosswalks where we have those going over from not Scotland Street, they're from the Lodge going across the street to the magazine, and also from Shields Tavern to the parking lot over there. Very unsafe conditions. There's wonderful lighting that is mood lighting, but it doesn't help in one way or another in the crosswalks. A lot of folks are wearing dark clothing these days, and it's only a matter of time before someone's going to get injured there. You just can't see the pedestrians crossing until almost too late. And I know the speed limits are low, but on a rainy night, it can make it that much more perilous. I know there were some enhancements made at the crosswalk from the old bookstore to the college, and that's been greatly appreciated, as well as in front of the Mason School of Law. That crosswalk has always been a great enhancement, so I encourage you to take a look at something, maybe not so vibrant, but just increased lighting at those crosswalks would be helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. John. Anyone else? With that, I'll close the public comment section, and before we get into the background presentations, Mr. Trivette, Ms. Shelton, may I ask you a few things? On Ms. Gillies' comments, staff has had ongoing conversations with Colonial Williamsburg on the relocation of the bus.
Yes, sir. For the last 2 years now, we've been working with Colonial Williamsburg closely to try and identify an acceptable location to move that from Nassau Street, particularly during the construction, but even after the construction, and have not been successful in finding something that meets all of the needs. We're trying to find that correct spot that balances Colonial Williamsburg's need to protect the walk and view shed to the new museum after a $40 million investment, as well as the tourism industry's need to be as close as possible to Merchant Square. And so when you think about what Ms. Gilly said in terms of how many buses we need to accommodate, there's not a lot of streets that can accommodate that in that zone. So I think while we have done all we can to find a space that would accommodate as many as 20 buses, it just doesn't exist outside of Nassau Street itself. So what we're doing is allowing Colonial Williamsburg the opportunity to solve this problem with their enhanced pull-off on Henry Street. They have committed to having public safety staff there to make sure that that transition of buses occurs regularly so that it doesn't become a parking spot. It's truly loading and unloading. And if that fails to meet the demand, then we will institute a Plan B. I'd like to tell you that we have a Plan B arrived at right now, but we don't.
May I encourage you to have conversations with my colleagues on council and see if there aren't some other creative solutions we could come up with, and if not, then what Plan B is going to be.
Certainly.
If I could just add, I met with Colonial Williamsburg officials last month as part of our monthly meetings, and that was a big topic of conversation, and we really did stress it. And I know that I pointed out that the 3 spots on Henry Street was probably just not going to be adequate. We're going to have to find a long-term solution, and they were committed to working towards finding a better solution moving forward. So.
Ms. Gennaro raised 2 questions. The first was the question about, does a city manager working group violate state sunshine laws? Ms. Shelton, do you want to chime in on that?
No, it does not. The city manager's working group is not a public body for purposes of FOIA, and so it does not need to go through the procedural requirements of FOIA.
And what about the disclosure of names of people in that working group?
If there's a document that contains the names of the members of the working group, we would have to disclose that.
I had a brief follow-up with that. With FOIA, I mean, obviously, it's not open to open meeting notice requirements, but in terms of FOIA, obviously, if the city manager's email is tagged, let's say, to the whole group, that's FOIAble,
Yes.
right? Any public official with the williamsburgva.gov, or even for our personal emails regarding any official city businesses, that's FOIAble.
Documents created in the course of public business
Yeah.
are subject to FOIA and would have to be released unless there is a specific exception that applies.
But then obviously, if you have individual members that are not city officials interacting with each other in the course of public business, that's not subject to
If they are members of a group that is engaged in, that's created by the city, that's engaged in communication, that would be public business, so potentially, yes, they would be.
Okay.
And just to be clear, I have no issue releasing the names of the people that are on that committee. All that I would like is the opportunity to inform them that we're going to be releasing the name.
Understood.
And see if they still want to serve.
Exactly.
The other question Ms. Gennaro raised was about the delay on Capitol Landing Road. I think there are 2 issues there. One is related to the demolition of the DMV, which the city is in the middle of considering multiple demolition projects, and so it's a matter of prioritization to some degree. And then the other was VDOT approval on the streetscape plan in order for us to put it out for public consideration. So do you want to comment on that?
I'm going to start with the streetscape piece first. We have been working for quite some time on a streetscape plan. One element that we felt that was missing from all of this effort was the public's opinion, particularly those people that live and operate businesses on Capitol Landing Road. So our process includes several public meetings to get their opinion on what the vision should be before we start a true design process. We have hired a consultant after going through a selection process. That consultant has a scope of work that we've approved, and we have submitted all the contract documents to VDOT, who has to review and approve that. They also have to get review and approval, it's my understanding, from the Federal Highway Administration. Our staff has been checking with VDOT on a weekly basis to follow up and make sure that that application stays at the top of the heap. But they're following the turnover of the state fiscal year. At the end of June, they received an inordinate amount of applications as localities received funding for new projects. In addition to that, the close of the federal fiscal year has slowed down the federal process for review, and so we're subject to that review process that's necessary. I can't say that it's been inordinate or taken an exceptionally long time. It's just part of the process. I think that the best advice we can give is that we just be patient and allow it to fulfill. In terms of the demolition, you're right, Mayor, we do have a number of applications that we're considering for demolition expense. And what we discussed at a staff level is the opportunity to delay demolition from immediate at the DMV Center, including the DMV building and the associated shopping center, until we are better prepared to start the work on Capitol Landing Road. Because, as you know, we at least have these three projects to consider. The first being a new fire station construction, the redesign of the road, which will move forward first, and the demolition of that property. We feel like doing the demolition in concert with the redesign of the road work starting will minimize the impact and give us the best advantage to take advantage of lower cost.
And in the meantime, if there's some steps the city can take to enhance the aesthetic of that piece of property, we should look at that without investing too much money in that.
I know that Public Works was out there today.
Thank you. Dr. Cranbuell raised a question, Ms. Shelton, that I don't feel comfortable addressing, so I need for you to comment on that.
The Conflict of Interest Act is a state law. It has specific requirements for when someone may and may not vote on an issue. Those things are if a member of a body is an employee of an applicant who earns more than $5,000 a year, they're subject to the Virginia Conflict of Interest Act. Unless specific exceptions are met, they cannot participate. That is not a local decision. That is a state decision. You are obligated to follow state law with respect to what you may and may not participate in. And so we don't have a lot of latitude to do anything that the state has not authorized us to do.
Mr. Trivette, Mr. Murray raised a question about the Tourism Contingency Fund versus the Tourism Development Fund, and I know that other people have, because they both involve the word tourism, they both involve the term fund, it can be a little confusing when we, if you want to just offer a brief description, and maybe we could reinforce that at our meeting on Thursday about what the differences are.
Sure, I'll do my best. So when we did the budget this year, one of the things that we did was we sort of consolidated all of the tourism expenses into one fund that's unfortunately called the Tourism Fund, for lack of a better name for it. Inside the Tourism Fund are two programs that have funding generated there. Number one is the Tourism Development Grant Review Program that we're going to hear about later today. And that is the program by which the city put together a collection of policies that govern how that money should be spent. It's a grant program that's applied for, it's reviewed by a specific committee, and we're going to have the results of that work today. The Tourism Contingency Fund has been around for a long time. That is, in certain years, has gone unfunded by the City Council, and in other years, it's had funding in the budget. The purpose of that grant fund is for projects that are new to the city, meaning a new event that hasn't been put forward before and wasn't ready for consideration when the budget was developed, or an existing event that is expanding or increasing its footprint in some way. And that's supposed to have been, as we like to say, a just-in-time grant program that's not bound to a specific time frame of grant submission, review, and then award, like the Tourism Development Grant Review Program is. So very different programs, one sort of centered on events and the other centered on infrastructure development.
And even though the one predated the other, one of the reasons for keeping those separate was to not distract the tourism development grant review committee from major projects by having to deal with the little one-off projects that come along the way.
Right, and we felt like the consideration of specific events, like on Thursday's agenda, you've got 2 to consider, would inordinately bog down the development grant review program or committee from their process of looking at infrastructure changes and development considerations.
And the last was Mr. Chauhan's comments about the potential safety hazard on Francis Street with the crosswalks that go from the lodge to Market Square and from the tavern parking lots over to the taverns. I believe those were recently repainted.
Yes, we have completed or are completing now the repainting of the crosswalks and curb lines throughout the city. I think Mr. Chauhan's point about the lighting is accurate. At the staff level, we spent a lot of time talking about lighting, particularly in light of last year's increase in pedestrian accidents. And Francis Street is one of those zones that we know is a problem and we'd like to address. Obviously, Mr. Chauhan alluded to the aesthetic value of the lighting that's there now. And so there, again, there's a balance there of disrupting the historic experience by installing more modern fixtures that provide more light with the fixtures that sort of fit the period. As we move through this coming fiscal year, we do have a project that improves the sidewalk along Francis Street. And as part of that, we are going to be looking at lighting fixtures and the light that's provided on the street.
If I'm not mistaken, there's been a fair amount of conversation about the concept of safety in and around the historic area. So that might be a question to re-raise regarding the lighting. I mean, I agree with Mr. Chauhan. Driving in there at night, if there's a little bit of rain falling, you lose a lot of the reflection off of clothing off those crosswalks. So anything we could do to improve that.
Absolutely.
Comments, questions? Okay, this takes us to our background presentations and discussions, of which we have 2 today. The first is a presentation concerning the 10th Biennial Association for the Study of the Worldwide African Diaspora, or ASWAD, to be held at William and Mary. Mr. Trivette, you want to kick this off?
Sure. I'm just going to go ahead and invite up to the podium Dr. Vinson, who's going to tell us about this year's program and the opportunity that it affords the city of Williamsburg.
Do you want Dr. Vinson over here?
Mr.
Please.
Vinson.
Welcome, Dr. Vinson.
See what we got.
There
we go.
Success.
Okay. And then this scrolls up. Scrolls up. Okay, got it. Wonderful. Thank you. Mayor Freiling, members of council, City Manager Trivette, City Attorney Shelton. Thank you. I'm honored to be here to discuss this magnificent conference that will bring the world to William and Mary. As City Manager Trivette said, I'm Dr. Robert Trent Vinson. I'm a Cummings Professor of History and Africana Studies. And I'm working with Ms. Shadra Pittman here, if you don't mind standing, Ms. Pittman, working on this wonderful event. We have a number of faculty members and students and staff and interested community members who want to know more about this wonderful conference. So ASWAD 2019 brings the world to William and Mary. And in this PowerPoint presentation, I'll talk quickly through just to introduce everyone to ASWAD. And what is ASWAD? The Association for the Study of the Worldwide African Diaspora. It's been an organization that's been in existence for 20 years now. And the mission of ASWAD is to bring international scholars focusing on Africa and the African diaspora. It's a global organization to study that history and to connect it to relevant issues of today. It is interdisciplinary. It ranges across the disciplines and indeed across the world. We are bringing, in this 20th year of ASWAD, we are bringing 1,000 people here from 30 different countries, November 5th through the 9th of this coming year. This will be the largest conference that ASWAD has ever had by far. And ASWAD has been in some amazing places from New York, Boston, Rio de Janeiro, Barbados, Ghana, Pittsburgh, Dominican Republic, Charleston, South Carolina, and Sevilla, Spain. And here we are, Williamsburg will be the next city here. So truly, this will be an extraordinary event. I don't think Williamsburg has ever had this type of event with this many people here, certainly not since I've been here, since 2006. So we're very excited about this event. And we're really excited because we were underdogs. We weren't expected to win the bid. So this is a competitive bidding process. So cities and universities from around the world bid to host this conference. And so we won a competitive bidding process with a number of cities and universities from around the world. We were up against Emory University in the city of Atlanta as finalists. And in Sevilla, Spain, 2 years ago, we were duking it out with Emory in Atlanta with all of its wonderful resources, and they were sort of looking down at us, well, who is Williamsburg? And well, we showed them who Williamsburg was. We made a very, I think, attractive bid, obviously, because the ASWAD Board of Directors decided that after Sevilla, Spain, the next stop would be Williamsburg. And so 2 years later, here we are, gearing up for this conference that will be taking place in just 2 short months, less than that even. The global effect of ASWAD, I mentioned that 1,000 scholars will be here, coming from 30 different countries, and truly it's global. There will be scholars and activists and interested people coming from Asia, Europe, Africa, Latin America, the Caribbean, and of course the United States and Canada and Mexico as well. So it truly is a global event. Most folk coming would have never have been to Williamsburg. This will be an introduction for them. And it's wonderful that they'll be able to spend 5, 6, perhaps a week here in Williamsburg. Many will bring their families and make it a vacation. And so with 1,000 people registered for the conference, there'll probably be even more people coming when we consider the families that will be coming as well. So this is a truly global effect that will be coming to Williamsburg. Part of the hook, one of the reasons that we won the bid was because of 1619 and 2019. Williamsburg happened to be the right place, and this year happened to be the right time to remember those 20 and odd Africans who came to these shores enslaved in what was Point Comfort, now Hampton, and made their way to Jamestown, right down the road here. So it's a time to remember, to reflect, and to honor those Africans who first came and their descendants. This is the significance of this conference at this place and at this time, to speak to those issues and to speak about how those issues might be relevant in today, in our world today. That is the significance of 2019 and ASWAD. Going forward, of course, William & Mary is hosting the conference. Of course, William & Mary is a big place. It's an old university. It's been around since 1693, the second oldest university. This is the oldest continuous building, the Wren Chapel here. But we have no space on campus to hold over 1,000 people. And so that's why it's being hosted at the Williamsburg Lodge. We will have events at William & Mary. We will have events at Jamestown. We will have events in Hampton and in Richmond. So not only is it a global organization, of course, but the scope and the impact of this conference will be centered on Williamsburg, but will be regional as well. The themes of the conference are remembrance, renaissance, and revolution. And of course, we remember the ancestors, the people who helped found the organization, and other activists and writers who have died in the last year. ASWAD is much more than an academic organization. It is about serious scholarship, of course, but it is also about remembering those who worked with cultural production, the writers and the artists, the founders of organizations. We remember them and we honor them at ASWAD. We will have signature events at Jamestown Settlement, American Evolution, the Virginia statewide 1619 Commission is a major sponsor for us, and we will be having a major event Wednesday night, November 7th at Jamestown Settlement. So we are a signature event for all of the events that are happening with American Evolution that have been happening over the past 2 years. We are part of that roster of events. Of course, we will be having remembrance ceremonies at the site there in Jamestown Settlement that you see there. It's about remembering and reclaiming space, this space where 400 years ago people came enslaved. And now 400 years from that point, we reflect and we remember, and again, we honor. While we're at that special American Evolution event at Jamestown, we'll tour Jamestown Settlement and also see the exhibit, Tenacity. I'm sure many people in the audience have seen that wonderful exhibit. We'll see that exhibit focusing on women, 400 years of women from Europe, Native American women, African women. So we'll see that exhibit. We'll also showcase William and Mary professors. Theater professor Omiyemi Artisha Green will give a play at William and Mary. We'll have commissioned art projects by Steve Prince, who is at the Muscarelli Museum. He's an artist in residence. Leah Glenn, William and Mary faculty member who has her own dance theater, will close the event with a wonderful dance and then reception at the VMFA in Richmond. So we're showcasing William and Mary faculty, William and Mary students. We have Mr. A.J. Joseph here, student assembly senator, who is coordinating having students involved with the conference. For instance, the gospel choir, Ebony Expressions, will be performing as well. So this is really a showcase of Williamsburg and William and Mary, and really the whole community for this wonderful event. We'll also have art exhibits, bringing young people from K through 12, and even college students, of course, involved with the conference through poster boards, presenting their own research, essay competitions, artistic competitions. So we really want to involve the whole community. We don't want this to be an event where pointy-headed intellectuals get together and talk to each other, and then they go home. We really want this to have a lasting impact on the community beyond the academics at all age levels. We'll also take visits to historic Jamestown, where the archaeological work is being done, particularly on those first 1619 Africans, particularly the woman known as Angela. So we'll also be going to look at this history in action, this archaeological work being done as it happens, this living history. Of course, we'll be having world-famous speakers. Ta-Nehisi Coates, who I think most of us know in this audience, has graced us with his presence. He has a soft spot for ASWAD, as he says, and so he's coming to us on Friday night for all of those who might want to be in attendance. So Ta-Nehisi Coates will be here. We'll also have the wonderful filmmaker and actor Tim Reed. He'll be hosting an African Diaspora Film Festival. Again, for those who want the scholarship, yes, come and get it. There's plenty of that. But maybe you want a break, and maybe you want to see some wonderful film. And so we'll have a film festival showing films throughout the conference. Dr. Carol Anderson at Emory University. She's not upset with us that we beat her out for the bid. She's decided to come, and we're honored to have her give the keynote at that special American Evolution Wednesday night event. So these were some of the people who will be here at this marvelous event. And here are some of the institutional sponsors. We have been fortunate enough to have many, many sponsors at William and Mary and outside of William and Mary, who have seen the vision for this conference and are excited by it and have lent their support financially and in a multitude of ways. So we've been very excited about that. It's not just a singular William and Mary event. It has really become a regional event. We have partners from Hampton, Fort Monroe, all the way up to Richmond with the VMFA and the Virginia Museum of History and Culture and many, many others. We've also partnered with universities like VCU and Hampton University in Norfolk State. So we're excited about the broad support that we've received for this conference. And of course, ASWAD, bringing 1,000 people from 30 countries around the world, brings the world, it brings diversity to William and Mary, to Williamsburg, to the region. And so we're excited about reshaping the narrative, if you will. When those first Africans came here 400 years ago, they brought a type of diversity to this place that was already populated, obviously, by Native Americans and settlers from Europe. Now, this is even more global in contact and connection with people from around the world 400 years later. And so again, the connection between 1619 and 2019 come true. So the ASWAD effect, 1,000 scholars and artists and journalists and activists coming, representing those 30 countries, staying 5 nights in our hotel and sometimes more, because some have already registered and have already told us they're going to stay for a whole week. The dining and the shopping, all the people who have never heard of Williamsburg or may have heard of Williamsburg but have never been here, they will come. And so I'm excited as a longtime resident here of having people know where Williamsburg, Virginia is, and more than that, know what we have to offer. So that's a really exciting part of this conference. It's much more than just an academic conference. It's really about bringing people here, discovering Williamsburg, and perhaps having it in their minds that they want to come back afterwards. We felt that our vision was very much aligned with the vision of the Greater Williamsburg Chamber and Tourism Alliance about the idea of recruiting businesses and bringing in professional conferences here, bringing people here to experience Williamsburg perhaps for the first time, and perhaps after the first time, not the last time. And so we feel that we're aligned in many ways with what our city planners who think about these things every day, we're aligned in that vision. And so finally, to conclude, you can find out more information on the website, www.aswaddiaspora.org. That's one D in the middle, aswaddiaspora.org. Or you can email us as well at aswad2019@williamandmary.edu. And again, the dates of the conference, November 5th through 9th, 2019. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Vincent. Any questions, comments?
First, you don't look like you came out too badly beat up by the folks down in Emory. But, you know, as I listened to you, I'm reminded of, you know, what great fortune we have to be here in Williamsburg with the college in Colonial Williamsburg and have people like you and the talents that you bring to William and Mary to help bring events like this that mean so much to America, that you know, who we are today, and just kind of reminds us of where we come from. When we talk about parking, it really makes parking insignificant now. This is the important topic, and so I'm really excited that you all were successful in bringing that to Williamsburg and the college, and look forward to having them here and offering whatever support we have to give. And when it comes to duking out for the next conference, we're right beside you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Pastor Vincent, thank you for being here today and presenting this quite ambitious and marvelous undertaking.
Thank you.
I think there's a lot of great benefits to kind of look forward to from this. And you know, we always talk about how do we draw students and scholars out of the walls of William and Mary and engage with the greater Williamsburg community, and for us here within the city boundaries. And this is one of those types of projects that I think brings the greater Williamsburg into the fold. And what better place than Williamsburg to be a focal point of some deservedly hard discussions on race, on history. You know, we can claim a lot of triumphs, but we can also claim a lot of great pain in this particular city. And I hope something, when you know, in discussing the legacies that come about from this particular city, I hope it's productive when you're talking about the narrative and you're talking about history. So greatly appreciate you putting Williamsburg on the map, and you know, looking forward to the conference.
Thank you so much.
And I too would like to thank you for the presentation and all your work for bringing ASWAD here. In fact, while you were answering, Benny was talking, I pulled up the website and I see that there are 136 different topics listed for the days that you're here. So you've had a lot of work putting together the schedule, because that was one thing I was curious about as to whether you could see what was planned for the 5 days, and it is there. And I do hope that there are ways that we can help and others in the community to get the word out, because I know that sometimes these events take place and we assume that everyone knows about them, and after they occur, it's like, oh, I wish I had known about that. So anything that the city can do, speaking for the staff and,
Sure.
and us to help promote this, we'd like to be a part of.
Absolutely. We'd be so appreciative of any resources that you can offer, any networks of communication, of publicity. We would love to that, because that's what we don't want, obviously, right? We don't want someone to say, oh, on November 10th, I wish
Right.
I'd known.
Right.
We want everyone to know. And so we want more than 1,000. We want 2,000 people to come, right? And so,
Well, I might send you an email with a couple
okay.
ideas.
Thank you.
And Councilman Maslin has dressed in his tribe finest just for you.
Thanks. I enjoyed talking before the meeting, and anything we can do to make connections with our partners. The Chamber of Commerce is here. The Tourism Council was invited. So there are a lot of things that we can do to help you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
I do have one question for you, sir.
Sure.
Are any of the sessions or events open to the general public beyond people who have registered for the conference?
Right, so they are open. We are asking for those who attend the conference for the whole period of the conference. The fee would be $100 to register for the conference. That comes with full access to all events. That comes with food. We feed folk there, so breakfast, lunch, and dinner comes with that. That also includes the excursions from Hampton to Richmond on Saturday. If someone only has one day, for instance, it's a $35 one-day pass. And so one doesn't even have to be a member of the organization. You can pay that one-day fee of $35 and have your run of the place, and obviously have food and drink and enjoy all the academic and the cultural events that happen. So that is the idea. So we want that to be open to the public, not a closed event.
Mr. Trivette, could we ask, will Ms. Hartman be back by then?
Oh, well, by November, certainly.
Or at some point, someone on city staff to connect
Sure.
With Kate Hoving, your secret weapon over there, who's one of your biggest advocates, or with whomever it makes sense, so the city can help get the word out through the neighborhood council, through our website, social media,
Sure.
Whatever channels we have.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mayor.
The biggest disappointment that I would have is if you have this wonderful event, and like you said, people say November 10th, I didn't know it's there, or more people could have come because you had the capacity and that space went empty.
Right.
And then people don't get the benefit from it. We need to make sure we do all we can to avoid that. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we will be taking up this request for support from the Tourism Contingency Fund at our meeting on Thursday. Our next background presentation discussion is a presentation of the Tourism Development Grant Review Committee funding recommendations. Ms. DeWitt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. I'm here just to tell you about the process and the audience about the policy that council has set in place for this fund. And then I'll turn over the exciting part to the chairman of the Tourism Development Grant Review Committee, who will talk about what the committee's recommendations are to City Council for funding. So if you will indulge me, I'd like to talk about Senate Bill 942 and that becoming state code or state law, and adding an additional 1% sales tax to the 3 localities of the greater Williamsburg area. And the state code says that those funds, half of that 1% sales tax will go directly to the Regional Tourism Council. And the state code says exactly what that council is and how it's set up, and it will be spent to market, to attract visitors outside of the area to the greater Williamsburg area. The other half of that 1% sales tax returns to the locality where it was paid, where the transaction occurred. So each of the 3 localities receive those funds from the state. We receive them a little later than other state funds, but our wonderful finance director, Barbara Dameron, has been working hard with the other finance directors on that piece. So that half of the new 1% sales tax that comes back to the locality is the locality's choice how to spend those funds. And this city council and former city councils have committed to pledge those funds to invest in tourism. So they're collected on a tourism tax, so the idea is to invest them in our tourism product and our tourism infrastructure. And you set up a policy that talks about how that can be done. And I just want to bring that up because there's been some confusion in the press and otherwise that the funds we're talking about are the marketing funds, and they are not. They're separate funds that come to the city of Williamsburg. So I'll talk about the timeline there. Earlier this year, council adopted a revised policy that says how those funds will be used, and that policy structured that a review committee would be appointed by city council, and you did that in January. And that committee would go through a process of asking, soliciting applications for grants to use these funds, and then evaluating those applications and going through an evaluation process and then recommending to City Council how the funds be used, not only for this first year, but make recommendations out for the next 5 years. The funds do not have to be spent in the current fiscal year. Council set them up much like a capital improvement plan, like our CIP. They can carry forward. So that's one thing that's different than some local government funds. So in February, your Tourism Development Review Committee held its first meeting and talked about the way to solicit applications and what the application would look like and what some of the guidelines would be as we were looking to spend these funds. They looked at your policy very closely of how to do that, and I'll get into the policy in a moment. And then released a phase 1 application. And your policy says that would happen. We do a phase 1 application. That's a shorter application. Submit your concept to city staff, and we'll look at it and evaluate it against the policy. And if it's eligible, invite you to do a more rigorous phase 2 application. So 22 applications were submitted in phase 1. 11 of those were deemed eligible according to your policy and invited to do a phase 2 application, which is a much more extensive application, much more detail in some cases, consultants and engineering architecture firms hired to do some of that work. 10 of those 11 applications came back for phase 2. So that was received in June. The committee met in June and let each applicant come present his or her project to the committee. And after each of those presentations, individually, the committee members have a guideline matrix that you ask them to set up, and they scored them individually, just as a first take. First time we've heard the presentation of the program, and that was sort of the first look at judging the applications and getting to a recommendation. Those scores were combined and averaged, and then a ranking of highest to lowest of the 10 applications was presented. The committee came back to do the even harder work in July, which is to discuss all of those, knowing we've done some guideline matrix and looking at those rankings, but discussing them all as a whole. There's 10. How do they relate to each other? Before they were just scoring them individually, but a discussion of how they relate to each other and how these funds could best be used moving forward. And they've done that, and they've done a great job. I must say, your committee has worked very hard. As you know, all your appointees are volunteers. They've done a really good job and worked hard on this. Before I turn it over to Chairman Karachi, I would like to just show the audience the purpose of the Tourism Development Fund that City Council adopted. It's policy number 1903. And going back to my earlier point, it's not the marketing for tourism. This is about when our tourists arrive here, what do they experience? What attracts them here? What are their memories when they leave here? So the purpose is to increase patronage to restaurants, attractions, hotels, and events in the city of Williamsburg through financial assistance and reinvestment in tourism products, placemaking projects, special events, and public-private partnerships. So council gave the group pretty detailed purpose there. And then the policy also goes on to say, here's 4 eligible expenses, the use of these funds. The first is to develop, expand, or renovate tourism product and infrastructure for tourism products. You're going to see both of those in the applications that the chairman is going to review with you. Secondly is placemaking projects and events. Even in economic development, even in my field, we are realizing more and more that placemaking is an important part of having a city that can be economically viable, a place where people want to visit and come back to. People expect it now. And that goes for the people who we want to recruit and keep here to work here, but also those visitors, we want them to come and have memorable experiences while they're here. And then thirdly, EDA projects and programs, and you're going to see one EDA proposal in the batch of 10, and then fourth, some administrative expenses to staff the committee and keep all this going and track the projects that are funded. The third thing the policy did was say, here are some examples of projects. So the committee looked closely at this, and there's a list of 13 here, and you'll notice number 13 is other projects that meet these other eligibility criteria. So we didn't want to close the door to anything we hadn't thought of or anything that the private sector or nonprofit or others may bring to us, a concept that would fit here and work really well. So category 13, keep in mind, is that other category. So where we are today, as I said, Chairman Karachi will come give the recommendation for funding. And I see Sally Wolf, another member of the committee, is also here. Thank you, Sally, for your service. And Now it is for, after this recommendation, they're happy to take questions, and then the ultimate decision is city council's on how the funding moves forward. Any questions before I step aside?
Just real quick, you said the EDA could be an applicant. The city also can be an applicant, right?
Yes, good point, Councilman Zhang. The city of Williamsburg can also be an applicant, and the policy says that as well.
Also, this is an advisory committee, right? So we appointed all of them. Ultimately, it'll be up to us to decide whether we follow through with their recommendations or if we think we disagree, right?
Exactly. Much
Something
like
changes.
you have other advisory, much like the Planning Commission, I like to think of it. The Planning Commission makes a recommendation to City Council, but you are not obligated to follow that or not follow that. It is this council's decision on how these fundings will be made.
Thank you.
Yeah, a couple questions. Could you talk about the limitations on multi-year funding? And then also, it seemed like some of the funding requests were arbitrary in terms of equal amounts per over 3 years that didn't really correspond with build-out.
Sure. So I think the best way, I'll answer that now, and maybe after the presentation of the recommendations, you may have more follow-up questions, but I'll say now, we knew when we released the application for funding, both phase 1 and phase 2, that there could be applications that were greater in cost than the amount of money available in 1 year. So there's approximately $2 million available each year. We're forecasting, I think, 2.2 million each year, and that'll change based on sales tax revenue. So we knew there might be some projects out there that might cost more than $2.2 million. In fact, you're going to see some of those. And so we asked each applicant, what type of funding are they looking for? Are they looking for grant funding? Are they looking for debt service funding? So a way these funds can be used is somebody can take them as a pledge over many years into the future to pay off a loan, so to speak. So they can figure out a way to finance the program. They can go to a local bank. They may issue bonds if the city's willing to do that as a way to have more funds up front and then use the funds from this annual appropriation to pay off the debt service. Does that make sense?
Was there a number of years that would be maximum commitment by the city council?
There is, well, so state law would only allow a council to commit for 1 year, but you can make a moral obligation beyond that. And what the policy says is they want a recommendation from the committee for 5 years. But a moral obligation in terms of a bond, if a bond is issued, that obligation could be much greater than that.
Thank you.
Depends on the mechanism of funding.
But just to add to that, Senate Bill 942 has a sunset clause on it. So funding theoretically for our tourism development fund could end unless council comes up with another program to continue that funding.
There's a couple things that could trigger 942 having a sunset clause, yes. And I think if somebody went bond financing route, the underwriters would have to take all that into consideration and do that analysis of that legal language there. Exactly. It'd be part of the underwriting process. Well, now for the much more exciting part. I'll ask Chris to come forward and start with.
Thank you, Ms. DeWitt. Welcome, Mr. Karachi.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, council members, Mr. Trivette, Ms. Shelton. This is the exciting part of the meeting now.
What are you saying about the rest of it, sir?
No, it's all good. This is the first time we have done this. Obviously, this is the inaugural run of this committee. And I'm your inaugural chairperson for this first run. I will run through each of the projects that the committee is recommending for funding. I will talk about several that came to us with final proposals and we did not recommend for funding. I'll talk about those as well. And based on your feedback to us earlier, Mr. Mayor, we'll wait for comments or questions until I've gone through all of them. And then I will do my best to answer your questions along with Barbara, Michele, Randy, and Andrew. All jump in where we need to jump in to try to answer some of the details. There's many, many, many details. So let me run through these. I have some comments about some of them as well that I'll make as chairperson. I'll make as we go along. All right, first one's on the screen already. We have an order that we're going through, obviously, with these. The first one is probably one of the biggest. It is for the Goodwin Square project. Colonial Williamsburg came to us with this request to convert the P3 parking lot to a plaza. As you can see here, this is well known, these plans are well known, into a combination of green space, shaded space, walkways, connection between Merchant Square and Prince George Street and all the businesses there, additional seating space out there, an occasional screen, which would be a portable screen, which is limited to only a certain number of days per year that can be up for particular events, and a splash pad. And there seems to be much confusion about what a splash pad is. It is not a fountain per se. It's not a container where it fills with water. It's rather a flat surface with fountains coming out of the flat surface. They're wonderful for children to play in, and the water goes immediately back into the ground. So the ground absorbs the water in this kind of surface. And that's part of it as well, as you can see on here in that white interior space. In addition to this plaza, it increases the handicap parking capacity from 4 spaces to 8 spaces, and it also has a new restroom facility being built, as you look at the screen, up in the upper right-hand corner there, beyond the handicap parking. So that would be a much needed additional restroom space, because as we'll talk in a few minutes about another project, the Henry Street restrooms are so overwhelmed most of the time. They're the only public restrooms really in the area, and this would help alleviate some of the pressure on those Henry Street restrooms. So all good. The request coming to us was for this first year a $400,000 grant, and then for us to earmark, or the wish to earmark, $400,000 for the next 4 years after, for a total of $2 million coming from this fund. Colonial Williamsburg will, in addition to that, provide another $1.5 million for the complete construction of the space. Colonial Williamsburg would maintain the space as part of their maintenance plan, and the space, we have indicated, would be open to the public all the time. Obviously, there would be special events held in there, but it would be a public plaza, even though it is, if you will, privately owned by Colonial Williamsburg. Construction could begin as early as January, and the construction's very quick, would be done by early summer of next year. So about a 5 to 6 month construction plan from start to finish. So the request is for $2 million over a period of 5 years, $400,000 this year. My committee, the Grant Review Committee, unanimously voted in favor of this project, as did the Planning Commission for the City of Williamsburg, unanimously in favor of the project. It was, of all the projects that came to us and voted by all of us on the committee, the #1 project. It fits squarely within the downtown vibrancy effort. It fits squarely within the reasoning and the guidelines for this particular fund, and so our recommendation is to fund that. If you look at the screen, and this is also in your paperwork, more detail, the type of expenditure it is a placemaking project, and the examples of projects are the renovation of streets, public parks, public art, visitor infrastructure. Moving on to the second project is as I mentioned already, is the renovation of the Henry Street restrooms. The Colonial Williamsburg initially came to us wanting us to help with some 4 or 5 restrooms across the historic area. We pulled back from that and came back really to Merchant Square and said that we would fund the renovation of the Henry Street restrooms, which are the most heavily used. I would add that they're asking for a grant of $350,000 to fund this renovation. It's really not a renovation, it's a gutting of the restrooms as they exist now and a complete rebuilding of the inside. They also need to be brought up to ADA standards, which they are not, and that would happen simultaneously. We also put a stipulation on this work that we would not we would not grant them that our recommendation would be not to grant them that $350,000 request until the restrooms were fully completed. And that there was some accommodation while those restrooms are being worked on for there to be access to some restrooms, whatever that looked like, whether they closed part of that building and they had half of it open, or they brought in portable restroom facilities so that they're not closing the entire facility and asking people to find restroom facilities elsewhere. We did not recommend the renovation of the rest of the restrooms, just this one. As I told my committee often, I guess the signal of a place when you go as a tourist someplace and you're thinking about the place where you're actually going, your restrooms and your parking lots speak the loudest. And frankly, when I have to go to the bathroom, I don't care if Colonial Williamsburg owns the bathroom or the city owns the bathroom, and the same with parking. I just expect there to be adequate facility for both, and that they be up to code and clean and inviting. So I think that's why we landed on these Henry Street restrooms. They are very front and center. They're used by pretty much everybody that goes to Merchant Square that needs a restroom facility, and it's a worthwhile program. So that would be a $350,000 grant one time for this next fiscal year. It would only be awarded after the completion of those bathrooms, and we have asked that those be completed by the end of 2020, so the end of next calendar year. The third project that we are recommending to you, and we have, again, these projects that I'm recommending to you, all of them were unanimously voted forward by every member of the Grant Review Committee. So there was no abstention or negative voting on any of these. They all come to you with our highest recommendation. The third one is the Boundary Street Plaza. This is really the plaza that is contiguous to this building out here, as well as the library. The library came to us with a funding request for several years, $100-some thousand for the first year, then the second year it dropped, and the third year it dropped. They were asking for essentially four things. They were asking for a portable stage that could be pulled behind a vehicle, set up, and then pulled away or driven away to a storage area. They were asking for an outdoor sound system. They were asking for furnishings, permanent furnishings for the plaza, and they were asking for programming funds. All of that was kind of bundled into a single ask for this year and next and the following. We agreed on only two of those asks. One was for the portable stage. However, the stipulation there is we would grant them, or we would recommend funds for that portable stage, but the portable stage would be managed by the City Parks and Recreation Department, not the library. It's an odd thing for the library to try to be managing as a portable stage pulled behind a truck. So Parks and Recreation would manage that and deal with the storage of that. That way, it could be used for any city event anywhere around the city when the needs arise. It's actually a very small stage, but it's large enough for a small group of musicians or a small group of singers. So we recommended funding for that, which is about $100,000 in total. And we also recommended a small amount of funding, $10,000, for a total of $110,000 this 1 year only. And that additional $10,000 would go towards additional permanent furnishings for the plaza area. As you may have noticed, they've already added some out of their own funding for that area in the last couple of months. So it would be additional. We did not think we were in the business of funding their programming, so we did not promote that, nor did we an outdoor projection system. We stayed away from that as well. So for the library, for this Boundary Street Plaza project, funding for furniture, outdoor furniture, permanent outdoor furniture, and funding for the portable stage, which would be operated by Parks and Recreation and used here and elsewhere in the city. $110,000 ask only for this year one. The Kiwanis Park 4th softball field, Again, highly ranked. These are all in order, kind of how we rank them. But the Kiwanis softball field, for us, was something we didn't have to think about much at all. We know that there's a huge difference between the number of softball tournaments that you can attract when you have 3 fields and the number that you can attract when you have 4 fields. It's a significant difference in those tournaments. And of course, those tournaments bring with them food and beverage income, lodging income. They bring their families with them. This ask for this 4th field at Kiwanis was for a total of $1.2 million. Spread over 2 years, $600,000 this first year, $600,000 the next. The construction period for this would be, it's pretty lengthy because of the time that the field needs to grow and get ready. So if they were to begin this construction in January, they would be ready for their first tournaments using all 4 fields by the fall of next year, by 2020. $600,000 again this year, $600,000 next year, a 2-year ask. 4th project was a signage project that originally came to us as just a very limited project for wayfinding signage, really between the Merchant Square part of downtown and out to what we call the delis. It was very limited. Initially in their ask, and we talked about that at length. We talked about that with Andrew, and we wanted to expand that because signage is the kind of thing that if you get signage this year and you go to get signage next year, trying to match the signage is always a problem. So you need to do something more comprehensive. As you can see on the map that we have in front of you, this is what we mean by comprehensive. This area of downtown from the delis all the way out to North Henry, all the way down South Henry, just beyond the museum, of course, and north to the Amtrak station, bus station to the north. We increased the amount that we were going to give to this project. They really came with a very small amount. We increased that to $250,000. This would go to the EDA who would manage this project, this wayfinding project, and all of the signage would be done at one time. So the whole thing would be designed together, all of downtown would be designed together, created together, and installed together as one project. Not only wayfinding for restaurants and places of interest, but also wayfinding for parking. That's also included on that. And as you probably already know, there are a lot of very inventive, innovative wayfinding systems that are out there. Some of them are electronic, some of them are on demand. There's all kinds of ways of improving that wayfinding, and the EDA would investigate all those ways. The last one that we are putting forward for recommendation is a very big one. We all unanimously also agreed on this project. I don't think anyone can say that this is not a worthwhile project to have this kind of indoor sports facility and recreation center. All you need to do is look around the country at the communities that have these. They're tremendous at bringing an influx of people coming in for tournaments, for use, overnight guests, the lodging, the food and beverage. It just goes on and on. However, having said that, it also has a big price, right? It's a very expensive project. The ask was for $40 million for this project. We knew, even though it's a very worthwhile project, we knew that there was no way, even if we gave them every dime we had for the next 10 years, we were not going to pay for this project. So, so very kindly, Andrew worked with us, and we know that for this project to become a reality, it has to be a regional project, City of Williamsburg, York County, James City County. We are a long ways from getting all of those people working together for this kind of project, but the Grant Review Committee wanted to at least get this train moving. We want to give some money towards this project to at least get it off the ground, and then we can work on that collaboration between those regions together. So as you can see here, the year one, which is what we're recommending for this first year, is to give them $250,000 to update studies that have already been done around this kind of facility, to do some other studies, and to begin design. Next year, we would earmark, or we'd recommend earmarking as far as we can do that, for another $250,000 to begin design work around this kind of facility. The following years, we would get into much more heavy lifting. The third year, this fund would give them $800,000, and the following year, $1.15 million. This has been, the city has extrapolated this out under a funding mechanism like a mortgage or a bonding, which might be for 30 years, according to Barbara, and at a 4% interest rate for 30 years, if we contributed $1.15 million, we would pay for half of the cost of this facility from this funding mechanism. The ask is for $40 million, but by the time we get to the end of a 30-year bond or a 30-year mortgage, we're looking at roughly a $69 million investment. If we, at the end of, or by that fourth year, start giving them 1.15, which is half of the current fund, and this is how much we believe in this project, whether it happens at Quarter Path or wherever it happens, we're very much in favor of this project. With our 1.15 contribution over all those years, we would pay for half of the total cost of this facility. That's where the work with James City County and the work with York County has to come in, because they would be responsible for the other half. So we were really in a bit of a, even though this is a great project, and we would love to see it come to fruition, we were in a bit of a quandary. They wanted a steak dinner, and we had a hamburger to give them. So we have to kind of say, what is it that we can do as the City of Williamsburg's Tourism Fund? How can we get this work going? But how can we also tell our regional partners that we have faith in this, and why don't they join us to help make this a reality for our community? It would be a boon for everyone, for James City County, for York County, for us here in Williamsburg, an incredible boon. You just have to look at the statistics from communities across the country that have these kinds of facilities. There is no shortage of tournament business out there for these facilities to take advantage of. Yeah, sports tourism is incredible, and we would love to see Williamsburg be part of that. But obviously, like I said, it's a very, very big project. So $250,000 this year for updates on studies and for some design, $250,000 next year, and then $800,000, and then $1.15. These are the last of the ones that we are recommending to you, but I want to go through a couple that we did present to us in phase 2, but which we're not recommending forward for a variety of reasons, and I'll talk about some of those. One was for a very, as you can see from some of these graphics, a very well-made pavilion, but a temporary pavilion, to sit in the lawn in front of the hospital, where we now hold the concert series. This would be, but think 5 times the size of that, right, that we do now for the concert series. Everyone thinks this is a worthwhile effort. That lawn space is the only real huge, big, open lawn space that can be utilized. We know that all the Merchant Square merchants benefit from having an event there. People spill over, obviously, into Merchant Square for food and beverage and for all kinds of other things. However, what we don't have enough information about is somebody needs to talk to Colonial Williamsburg and see if they want a big temporary pavilion that'll sit there for 6 months of the year in front of the public hospital. And we had this conversation quite a bit, because that's a big discussion, right? For something this modern, or even something that you try to theme to the rest of the architecture, it's still something very large that would not be taken down and set up between events. It would stay up for 6 months of the year. So many more conversations need to take place. Everybody thinks it's a worthwhile effort, but there's a lot of groundwork that still has to be done there before we can come up with a solution for that. The others, and they're just here in a single slide. One was, I mentioned already we talked about P3, but the other downtown parking lots. So essentially P2, P4, and P5, they came to us wanting money to completely renovate the parking lots, meaning repaving them, restriping them, re-landscaping them. However, we all think this is a worthwhile piece of work, but again, from my perspective, having worked in tourism all of my life practically, your parking lots say a lot about you. And if you have rundown parking lots that are just not maintained and they're full of mud all the time and puddles, it speaks volumes about you. Whoever owns the parking lot, it speaks volumes about your location. So we really wanted to make an impact here. However, there's intricacies, and Mr. Trivette can talk to these about our relationship with Colonial Williamsburg around these parking lots, who has control of the parking lots, who's responsible for maintenance, ongoing maintenance of the parking lots. So my committee, the Grant Review Committee, did not want to invest in any of these until that kind of relationship could be worked out better between the city and Colonial Williamsburg. Although it's like bathrooms. You can't go wrong with parking lots. But somebody has to step up and you have to figure it out, right? Because when I come here to park, whether I'm going to eat in Merchant Square, I'm going to down Duke of Gloucester Street, I don't care who owns the parking lot. I just don't want to get out of my car and step into a giant mud puddle because it's a giant cavern. So somebody has to figure that out. So more discussions around that. I think the committee, speaking forward, I think the committee would be happy to fund something like this if we could come to an agreement with Colonial Williamsburg. The second and third pieces on your screen too that we did not recommend forward were another two asks from Colonial Williamsburg. One was to continue with their streetscape project, which you have seen already. So this is going down towards the Capitol. It's where they've not curbed out, but they put in grassy areas. They've redone the drainage. They've helped with some of the grit and the gravel. It makes it very difficult. They've already started that from the Capitol moving this way, and they asked for more funding for that, specifically to come all the rest of the way down Duke Gloucester Street and all the way around Palace Green. So they wanted to do the same things. We turned that down for the time being. It again it's a worthwhile project, and not only aesthetically, I think it helps to make the area visually, I think, a little bit more inviting when you have a little bit more green. But I think what most people don't realize is in that work that they're doing, they're also redoing the drainage that's pulling water away from those historic buildings. Because of the degradation of what they had there before, the water is now seeping back into those buildings. So they have to work on that to pull water away from foundations back towards the street where it belongs, and that is also part of the project that you don't see, right? That's all infrastructure that's underneath that grass and that paving. We decided not to recommend that to you at this time. Again, that was a multi-year ask by them to help. And the last thing was to enhance, strengthen, whatever you want to call it, the Wi-Fi in the historic area. In some areas in the historic area, even in Merchant Square, the Wi-Fi is very weak. People with mobile devices have a very difficult time using the Wi-Fi. It was not an expensive project, but at this time we decided not to refer that forward to City Council with our recommendations. But again, all of these things are about improving the experience of people to Williamsburg. It's just we only have $2.2 million. So we have to try to, if you will, spread around some of that without letting anybody take any one big chunk of it while trying to make the community a better community. At that, I will stop. That's a lot of information. So at that, I will stop because I know you've all been writing down, especially Councilwoman Ramsey, writing down questions for me. What can I help answer for you? And like I said, oh, I'm sorry. One more slide. Oh, there we go. This is the money slide. So if you look in fiscal year 20 on the left of the spreadsheet, you will see for this year, all of the projects going down. Goodwin Square, $400,000. The softball field, $600. Signage, $250. Public restroom, Henry Street, $350. $110 for the library. $250 this year for the sports facility. and that's using 1.96 million of the funds that we have, and we are guesstimating, because we really don't know, about $2.2 million will go into that fund this fall. Then if you look off to the right, you can see how we've extrapolated out fiscal year 21 with 3 projects asking for money in next year, and then 2 the following 3 years. Those 2 being primarily the Goodwin Square project and the expansion, the sports facility project. That last figure that you see there in fiscal year 24 for the sports facility, that 1.15 million, that is actually the projected annual, our annual contribution, if you will, for that project, but for a very long time. So essentially, by the time we get to year 5, if the tax money stays the same at around 2.2, we would essentially be spending half of it on one project for quite a few years. But it is such a worthwhile project that somebody needs to step up and try to fund it.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Karachi.
Thank you.
And Ms. Wolf, thank you very much. And to all the members of the committee, what many people may not appreciate is not only did you have to go through the process of evaluating all of these projects, asking questions, assimilating and synthesizing that material and coming up with a recommendation, you also had to create some of this process as you went along, working with staff, because this is an inaugural year of something that's important and somewhat complicated in the first year. Now you've set the structure that others can follow over the coming years, and so we really appreciate all the work that you and your fellow committee members put into this.
Thank you.
I'm going to turn to my colleagues for questions.
Well, first, I would echo his comments. You all did pave the way, and it was no easy task. I know that this council and the council before, in grappling with this tourism development fund, how to fund it, what we had envisioned for these funds. We knew in our minds and our imaginations that it would run the gamut, and clearly what you have is the full gamut. I say that, but next year when we go through this process, we'll get some more applications, and that gamut will just continue to grow. So I applaud you for your efforts. Again, no easy task. And so for me, which leads to a question, and wondered, if you can kind of share the committee's thought process when you look at the economic impacts of any of these applications. There's an economic impact to a sports facility. It drives overnight visitation, lodging, dining, that type. And so that's almost tangible. Yes. But you compare that to a placemaking project, it doesn't have that economic impact directly that you can see. Now, I can defend that, and I will as we move forward in that discussion. But tell me, how did the committee grapple with that? How did you reconcile? I
think it's not specific, and I want to echo something that Michele clarified earlier. Somehow in the media, they have said that this fund is about funding things that promote overnight visitation. And if you look at the charge, overnight visitation is not even in the charge, right? So it's about, is that something we want? Absolutely. But it's not the only thing that we want. You have to create, so if you just look at the list that's in front of you, it is a variety of things on that list. So you have to balance what are the things that are the economic engines, like the sports facility, that we know will drive room nights and visitation and ticket sales and food and beverage and all of that, and things like the Goodwin Square project, right, which is more of a placemaking project. We have to have open discussions about that because they're two different things, but they're still worthy based on the charge of this particular committee, right? They're still worthy because one is primarily for, even though locals will take advantage of Goodwin Square, you're going to find a lot of usage, and I know this is by looking across the country and what we do in my own organization. If you create that, people will come. Now, do we know how much money they're going to spend? No. But do we know they spend money? Yes, right? Do we know in a placemaking project like Goodwin Square that they tend to stay a little longer if they have a place like that? Yes, right? The longer they stay, the higher the probability that they will spend money on something to drink, something to eat, whatever that looks like. Plus, the Goodwin Square project is connecting where, in my view, it has never been really connected. You're connecting Merchant Square with all the businesses on Prince George Street. And I know for myself, when I want to traverse that parking lot to get to Prince George Street from Merchant Square, you take your life in your hands, right? Because there really aren't good walkways. You're walking through the parking lot in order to get. By creating a connector like this, you connect one area to another. It's completely walkable. In fact, there's no car traffic in there. You end up connecting two very business-centric areas of your downtown. So vibrancy is there. So I think, and I want to refer back to something earlier, Councilmember Pons, is that we created a scorecard that Michele mentioned, a scorecard. One was for placemaking and one was for infrastructure projects that looked at what do we think this will do to visitation? What do we think this will do to the dollars? What do we think this will do to traffic? All those kinds of things. And we use that as a preliminary, how do we even start to rank these? Then all the rest of it becomes an open discussion and debate, taking in public comment, because we certainly got a lot of public comment, right, about the woes and the pros about these things. We have to start, and it's more of an art than a science. We couldn't put numbers to all of this, and the numbers would not give us an answer. It wouldn't, because the sheer breadth of things we're trying to give money to is too broad. I don't know if that answers.
Well, it did, but you brought up an interesting point, and it's somewhat concerning for me, because when we got started in the Tourism Development Fund, it was always about driving overnight visitation, and maybe that got lost in the communications with you all.
Well, no, I think it's not on your chart.
Well, it got lost.
Yeah.
But I think economic impact and overnight visitation are the same thing. And I think, looking at placemaking, you can drive that. You can drive those overnight stays, and you can drive restaurant sales. And those are the reasons why we got in this whole proposition of a tourism development fund, is to drive visitation to Williamsburg, because that's what our economy is based on. So we'll continue these conversations.
I would revisit that with the council, perhaps, and redefine the purpose of the committee, because that's.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
Maybe we should.
Yeah.
That's all I have.
Thank you for the most informative presentation. Again, just to echo my colleague here, I think you really did a wonderful job, especially with your business experience with tourism, to kind of lead the way with the committee. And obviously, all the committee members bring a wealth of experience into it. But, I remember when we were doing interviews, I was particularly excited to see your wealth of experience as well. So, well done in your presentation. I think you've articulated each project very well. Something, I guess, kind of shifting to Drew, in the future, we saw a lot of downtown and, other projects, but hopefully, I know we've tried to spur a policy for Capitol Landing Road. We had a speaker mention that today, and hopefully that's something maybe the city will consider, placemaking infrastructure, something like that, in the future, but I'm not sure what the plans are with that from the staff level yet. I guess in terms of with Goodwin Plaza, I guess because it's one of the bigger projects that's garnered so much public attention, can you give a little bit more into, I know you mentioned some of that already with Mr. Pons, but just some of the, I guess, committee members, thoughts, processes with Goodwin Plaza. You said it's hard to particularly point to a hard number. I've heard many things, there's a convenience factor if you take away the parking, but then at the same time, there's a lingering effect, right?
Exactly.
Like you mentioned.
Exactly.
What studies have you seen, what kind of comparisons have you guys seen or kind of related to that you thought, okay, this could also happen here in Williamsburg with Goodwin Square? That's a roundabout way of questioning, I'm sorry.
And I'll make some commentary here that this is my personal commentary. But as we listen to the feedback from the community, and really, and even outside the community, I think everybody that I heard from or my committee members heard from, 75% of them lived outside the community, whether they were giving us feedback. So only 25% of the negative feedback was coming from the city of Williamsburg, right? And it was split, if you will, it was split down an age demographic. All the negative feedback was coming from people over the age of 60 and over,
Yeah.
And all of the positive, yes, we want it, this is the kind of place we need, was coming from people under 60, especially families with children. I know in my own business and my own world, and we figured this out a long time ago, families with children have money to spend. They do. They may not spend it right then, but what you're trying to do is you're trying to impress a sense of place on children so that they come back. And you have a generational effect to what it is you're doing with anything that you build. So we heard a lot of negative comments about, and it's yeah. Williamsburg, and I paraphrase, Williamsburg is a retirement community. Millennials don't spend any money. Millennials with kids that'll come and play in the fountain won't spend any money. And that's a very broad generalization, right? If we don't build, if a part of us is not visionary, and we're not looking to Williamsburg 20 years from now, or Williamsburg 30 years from now, and we're not trying to build something that appeals to young families and children, even if it's a splash pad where they play in the water and they get wet, right? That's a powerful thing for families with kids. It just is. If you don't start thinking that's who you're building for, then who are you building for? If you're not building, are you building because you're not thinking about them and you're only thinking about this demographic over here, right? If you're not forward thinking, you'll never be better than you are. If you don't take a risk, you'll never be better than you are. So I'm all for placemaking. Even in a for-profit driven business like I am in, I am all about placemaking, because placemaking means people stay longer. It means they relax. And when they relax, they end up spending money. And I don't care if they stay there an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever it is, they will come back again and again and again, especially if they live in the community. They'll come back again and again and again. To sort of test this theory out, I drove about 2 weeks ago, I drove to the back of the woods over here near the Williamsburg Welcome Center, the Woods,
Woodlands Hotel?
Woodlands, sorry, the Woodlands. And they have a huge splash pad back there, right? And these are people, the kids were having a ball, right? The kids were there, mom and dad were sitting on the sidelines, they were eating, they were drinking. It's like a day at the beach. And so it has a real value. And I think what I am the most disappointed in from our community is that we're only thinking about tomorrow, as in tomorrow. We're not thinking about a year from now or 10 years from now. And some people get stuck in that. And I'm one of these people. The older I get, the more I don't like change. So don't change anything on me, because I just don't like change, right? And I'll fight change for the sake of fighting the change, when sometimes that's not the best thing, because I haven't stepped back and really taken a larger picture or a larger view of what's in front of me. I'm just thinking about me, right? That's why I don't want the change. So I think we just have to think in a broader, more visionary way for us to move forward with things that are very different from our experience sometimes. I can tell you now that a sports complex like this is very different thinking for a lot of people, right?
That was part of it. I think most folks, and I appreciate your answer with that. Again, just kind of echo, I respect your expertise, right? You're the expert, and it's great to have someone, again, with your experience, to be able to relay this to the decision makers. Obviously, we may not decide on this today, given this is a briefing.
No, I don't. This is not on your
But this is great. No, I
agenda
appreciate your honesty.
Sure.
I think honesty is only what at least I expect.
Yeah.
I think also with some of the comments, kind of the echo, you see some of the negative comments, and they kind of see it from just the Goodwin Square Plaza, which is totally understandable, because that's the SUP, the special use package that's before it. But if you look at the broad spectrum of, the presentation you've given today, and one of the policies that I recall when we were discussing this, and obviously I was on the opposing side then, because I thought there was a lack of clarity in terms of how the policy should have shaped. But I think, if you think holistically, it's interesting. One of the things that, Vice Mayor Ponce talked about is we need to find the next generational tourism product. That's why it's the tourism product that's in place. Not to say that all of these could be approved, some may be changed, who knows, right? But whether by this council or a future council, but you add, I could see how, a compelling, I guess, narrative from your point of view, how this Goodwin Plaza, even though it may be just one, small aspect of a parking space that becomes a plaza, can create holistically with the entire Colonial Williamsburg somewhat of a sense of place.
Yeah.
I see that a little bit clearer now. That's quite an interesting point of view. Appreciate that. If I have any questions else, I'll let you know.
And I think Commissioner Councilmember Zhang, I think the only negative comment that any of us got about Goodwin Plaza had to do with parking. Don't take away my parking. I want to be able to park right there, right? It was parking. So I think the fact that Colonial Williamsburg has asked to table this discussion around this and start thinking about P2, P4, P5, and redoing those lots, if you think about it, that whole area, you're surrounded by parking. There is parking in every direction. It's just, is the parking up to where it should be? Probably not, right? The standards of the actual lots are not there. So I think if you address some of the parking, the proximate parking, then I think you help alleviate some of the stress that's being caused by you're taking away my parking spot, right? So,
thank you.
Of course, that's for those who can never get a parking spot in that particular parking
yeah,
lot.
I've never been able to. Yeah, I've parked in P6, walked over to Merchant Square and had dinner, went back to my car, drove back to P3, and the same people are circling.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same ones are there. Yeah, and they could have walked there 20 times from a close lot.
Well, I have a few comments. Thank you for your presentation. I'll try to be brief. So a couple things. One, you mentioned the scorecard, and I know that there were a number of different components and things that you all checked, sort of to separate the wheat from the chaff, as I call it.
Yes, yeah.
And so would you mind sort of going through some of those things that were preliminary?
I can, and we created two scorecards. These two scorecards. One was for placemaking projects, and one was for infrastructure projects. And I'll read to you just some of the.
A few of them.
A few of them, right? Because they're, and again, we can't quantify everything that we're trying to weigh in on. All we can do is look at that and try to make a decision based on that. And I will add, the template for this, we actually started with the template that Asheville, North Carolina uses for their own vetting of projects. So we started there and we tried to make it very Williamsburg. So a couple of those things. Is the placemaking project a motivator of visitation to the city of Williamsburg? What is the event timeline? What do we think the return on the investment will be to the city of Williamsburg with the project? What's the uniqueness of the event or the project? Is there a marketing plan or an investment and business plan surrounding the project already, or is that yet to be built? What's the financial stability of the organization bringing us the project? What is the size of the market we're serving? Are we serving just Colonial or Williamsburg residents? Are we serving larger parts of the state or the region? What's the competitive profile of what it is we're building? Does another one exist in York County? Does another one exist in Newport News? If so, how can we be competitive with that? So those are some of the questions. A lot of those we don't have hard answers to, and you won't have hard answers to those kinds of things, so those kinds of measures until after the fact. You have to measure what happens afterwards. So what you have to do is say, all right, let's put these measures together, and then as a group of professionals that are part of this committee, let's put all of our know-how into this process and evaluate through our own filters what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, what is good return for the city of Williamsburg on these dollars being spent in the grant, and what is not. So as I said to Vice Mayor Pons earlier, it becomes an art of decision-making and not necessarily, there's a little less science on the front end and it's more art. On the back end, you can get much more scientific with measuring results.
And so obviously that would be one of the things with the indoor sports facility.
Absolutely.
To really look and see what the competitive nature is, and even if there are facilities in fairly close proximity, what the value of having that here in Williamsburg and the draw for Williamsburg would be for those participants.
I think Williamsburg has the advantage of having something else here other than just the sports facility. A lot of these locations that have these facilities are really, there's no other draw to their area other than the sports facility, and they have the hotel rooms to be able to support that are proximate. But we have Colonial Williamsburg here. We have a vibrant community. There's a lot to pull people in to say, why don't you come not only for your sports event, but then why don't you stay for a day or two and experience Colonial Williamsburg, right? So we have something else to offer them. In this world of sports business and in sports ventures, having something else at your destination other than just the sports facility is huge.
Well, and I found that out when I was volunteering for the national softball tournament that was here and talking to other people. And they brought out at that time the need for us to have the fourth field, because then we become a complex.
Yes,
And
exactly.
just that word complex makes a huge difference. So, and I think we have to remember that with the sports facility, with the fourth softball field, we are appealing to families. It's not old people that are going to, except they're going to come and watch their grandchildren, but we're building these for families with children to come to Williamsburg and participate. And so if we expect them to come and participate and spend money while they're here, then that, to me, ties in with Goodwin Plaza, because that's yet another area for them to go and to linger and to explore and spend money. So
Absolutely.
it sort of goes together. And one thing you talked about as far as looking 10 years out, I think that even though some of us won't be here when driverless cars become the norm, but that will come whether we like it or not.
Yes.
I think just the fact that a lot of people use Uber and Lyft to get from one destination to another is changing the driving habits and really the need for parking from when it was when I first started driving. One thing you talked about too was the restrooms that would be included as part of the Goodwin Plaza
Yes.
project. Was there a cost allocated to that portion?
No, it was built into the overall ask for the construction of the plaza, of the square. And I think it's been there since the beginning. Am I right, Mr. Trivette? The restrooms in that corner have been there even last year, in those plans last year. Those restrooms have been there. So they're included in the cost of redoing that entire plaza.
And since just the cost for renovating the restrooms at Henry Street is about $350,000, I would assume it would be at least that or more for the construction of a new facility in that area.
Good question. We all questioned that $350,000 for renovating those bathrooms. We thought, my gosh, we could build a house for that, right? And they want to renovate a bathroom. But I think what we don't realize is that the amount of pressure that facility sees on a daily basis, they absolutely have to gut the entire interior of that. They have to make it ADA accessible. So it's not a small, I'm going to go in and put in new counters and some new stalls. It's a very extensive project.
But it would be the same footprint that's there now.
The same footprint, yeah. They would not, in other words, they're not going to completely scrape that current facility. They're going to use the shell of that, but take out everything inside and rebuild it from the inside out.
And then one last question. On the temporary pavilion on the DeWitt Wallace, you said it would be there for 6 months.
That was the plan, only because of the cost. It's a giant, we saw some mock-ups. It's a giant covering. It's essentially a covering, right? That would run almost, if you went almost to the doors of the hospital, all the way out to Francis Street. That entire length going that way, which is a giant structure. And to make it look like it wasn't a temporary structure, to make it look more permanent, so aesthetically it looks better, the cost of that was, there was a lot of money involved. Our hesitation on the committee was Colonial Williamsburg. They have this historic hospital, that's reconstructed hospitals that's sitting there. Do they want any kind of awning facility, whatever it looks like, running from the door of that to the street? And I think there's too many questions unanswered there. The discussions have to happen with Colonial Williamsburg, whether that's even an option to do that.
If I may clarify, some people may not understand what you're talking about. The applicant for this project was not Colonial Williamsburg.
No, it was not.
Right.
I'm
If you
sorry,
could
yeah,
just
the
explain
applicant
that.
for that pavilion project, and I'll go back to it, there it is. That pavilion project, that was not Colonial Williamsburg. They wanted to use Colonial Williamsburg's property, and the cost, Councilmember Ramsey, the cost of putting up or putting up and taking down that big of structure would have completely made it not worthwhile financially to even erect that kind of structure. They needed to put it up and it needed to stay up. Yeah, it was not so it's temporary in the sense that it's not structural. They haven't driven pylons into the ground and built brick around it. But it's huge. It's a huge project with huge awnings. So we suggested they go back to Colonial Williamsburg and find a working relationship. It may be something that Colonial Williamsburg could use for all of their events. You know, how many times do you see tents go up on that lawn for Colonial Williamsburg events? So it's something I think that they would use too, but all of those discussions need to happen before we start saying we'll give you $200,000 or we'll recommend giving you $200,000 to build one, right?
Mr. Mayor, if I may add about the temporary pavilion. So Culture Fix was the applicant, and it was a conceptual idea. And their application said we should eventually have some sort of pavilion like many tourist cities have on this lawn, because it's a large lawn where where people can gather and have events, as Mr. Gracci has said. So the application from Culture Fix said, let's put up a temporary tent like is put up during the Arts Festival and test it out. Let's leave it up for half the year and see what that's like. The committee and staff did not think that was probably the way to go, but we felt that this was intriguing enough, and the committee was intrigued enough to have some conversations. Maybe something out there, we have no idea what it would look like. So these are just concepts out there. And we need to pay particular attention to the property owner's interest, but also the community's interest. We're a historic community, and aesthetics are very, very important to us. So that would need to have a lot of community discussion and property owner discussion. But we felt it was intriguing enough as a tourism product, as an effort to bring some excitement and get people have a memorable experience downtown, to continue the discussion. So it is confusing, as you said, Mr. Mayor. One thing was proposed, and then the committee was intrigued enough to say, the conversation should continue. But I don't think there's anything definite in mind.
So that's all the questions I had.
Thank you. Continuing discussion on the sports facilities, I think it really is important because you'll have families come for the event, but not everybody in the family is going to stay for the event. They're looking for other activities.
Yes, yes.
That's where, we have a competitive advantage. Regarding the softball field, maybe this is a question for Robbie, have we solved the concessions issue? Because that's a big factor in terms of a successful complex is having concessions.
Yes, we do. We have somebody that's filling our concession for us now.
Was there any need to do any improvement to the concessions facilities as part of this expansion? No. Okay. On the indoor sports facility, what discussion did you have about location, especially if we're going to have community partners, that maybe there's other locations that are better for everybody?
It's out of the purview of our committee to discuss the location. We're just discussing the project, the actual structure. So the proposed location was Quarter Path, but we did not get into, Maybe it's not quarter path, maybe there's another site, maybe we can buy land over here, we can put that, we thought that outside of our purview. We were strictly looking at the facility itself.
So how would that get introduced?
So I think that, on the slide that showed that project, there was some discussion of what's going to happen in sequence. And the very first step in year one is for the 3 localities that might fund such a venture, get together and decide what programming would be available in it. And until we do that, we don't even know really what size to consider outside of the study that's been done. And so once we've done that, the next step will be, of course, identifying the best locations to consider.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate your comments about, restroom conditions and parking lot conditions really being how we speak to the community, how we speak to the public. And I attended the Planning Commission meeting, and one of the comments was a gentleman whose wife actually broke her foot in the parking lot, the P2, because of it not being maintained by Colonial Williamsburg. So, and also that sort of suggested the question, if Colonial Williamsburg can't maintain parking lots, how can they maintain a plaza? Was there any discussion about that?
We did. That did cross our minds because they are responsible for the parking lots. But yet, how do you, we apparently, the city has a relationship with Colonial Williamsburg that says that they will maintain their parking lots, but yet they don't maintain their parking lots. So it's hard to, what do you need to do to ensure that? And I think that for us, as a committee, our discussions went to, well, the city just needs to own those parking lots. If the city owned those parking lots, and I know that's a big discussion, right? But if the city owned those parking lots, the city would maintain the parking lots, right? We wouldn't be dependent on another party that has ownership of that land to do the maintenance, because we know so far that hasn't turned out so well.
Right.
So the plaza, discussions of the plaza came in, we thought about that too, but where do you allow considerations like that to just stop you in your tracks and say, well, we're not going to do it until we figure out the maintenance? All of those, because the city and Colonial Williamsburg have this kind of symbiotic relationship, those things just have to be worked out from a legal standpoint so that you can make sure that those things happen and the promises that are made are kept.
Did the applicant not include some sort of maintenance plan in, correct me if I heard wrong, they have to submit a maintenance plan, right?
Not to us, they're
Not to
just
you guys.
submitting the construction costs to us.
Okay.
But in their application, it did say that the operating expenses would equal about $100,000 a year.
Yes, they did say that,
Okay.
yeah. They do have to say how much it's going to cost, and yes, we are going to be responsible for that, but
Gotcha.
how do you enforce, where's the enforcement of that happen, right?
And that's part of staff's role after council makes its funding decision. Any project that's funded will go under a performance agreement, and we're using the model that we use with economic development incentives for our performance agreement. And luckily, we have a fabulous council and our city attorney to help us with that. So we'll do as much as we can, and having had the lessons of the past 30 years helps us also moving forward with those performance agreements to ensure that maintenance happens.
What happens if performance doesn't happen? It's CW.
Well,
The big guy.
and that's an excellent question. We've had that same conversation.
Can
and
we
when
throw
made this,
civil penalties at them? How do we enforce this?
So we made this point with the committee relevant to the street maintenance agreement.
Okay.
And what happens when they fail to perform there. And I think you're still faced with the conundrum of how far are we going to take a dispute with a strategic partner?
Now, in some of the private industry, it would be especially like stormwater and erosion controls, the private applicant would have to post a bond to ensure performance. And that could be something that we could look at, is that, that would ensure that they have budget, either the budget that's in the bond or the budget that they plan for each year. Because that's been the problem, is nobody wanted to budget for it. So, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Karachi, once again, thank you for
Thank you.
your effort, the committee's effort, Ms. Wolf, Mr. Reeves, Mr. Foster, Mr. Voss. We appreciate everything that you all have done. Council will not be taking action on this at our Thursday meeting. There's planned action for October meeting, correct?
That is the plan right now.
So stay tuned.
Thank you. Sorry that all took so long, but it's,
I think we bring a lot of that upon ourselves.
yes.
That concludes our background presentations and discussions for today. The next item on the agenda is City Council communications. Does anyone have anything to report from a liaison assignment? Schedule of meetings, Mr. Trivette, anything you'd like to highlight?
Let's see, we have the EDA Business Roundtable tomorrow, and then, of course, City Council meeting on Thursday, Planning Commission on September the 18th, NRC will meet on the 24th of September, and there's a Planning Commission work session on the 25th, and then the final sort of debrief meeting of the Tourism Development Grant Review Committee will be on September the 27th.
Okay. This takes us to the open forum part of our meeting. Anybody who'd like to address council is welcome to come forward. We ask that you state your name and address and keep your remarks to 5 minutes or less. Mr. Murray, welcome back.
William Murray, 703 Goodwin Street. First of all, I'm over 60, and I think Goodwin Square is a good idea. So I think it's good. I agree with everything except with the parking lot. It's a mess down there. Okay, so a couple of things I had was, you know, I've done projects for many years. I work for Dominion, and there's always problems when you have projects. And a lot of these projects we're talking about, you know, Goodwin Square, where CW is contributing $1.5 million. Also, the bathroom is $350,000 for renovations. There's always problems there, and then there's always overruns. And so I guess that has to be worked out, who owns the overruns. If it's more than $3.5 million for Goodwin Square, does CW pick up the tab and stuff like that? That kind of stuff there. So, and the only other thing I had to say was, I heard the discussion on Quarter Path, and that's been a discussion for quite a long time. And in the end, the lady who lives in Quarter Path, I can sympathize with her. That boat sailed a long time ago when they were allowed to build houses on Quarter Path to say, we're going to expand this facility, and now we're going to have all these cars on that road, because it was not meant for that. So it'd be no different than if I live off of Burns Lane. If there's a facility down the end of Burns Lane and I got to deal with traffic, I'd be really upset that was allowed. This is something that has to go into the counties. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. Anybody else like to address council? Mr. Overy?
Mr. Mayor, a member of council, Rick Overy, 505 Richmond Road. Being aware of the hour, I just wanted to make sure and put in the public record that the EDA also, as a board, considered the issue particularly of Goodwin Square, and we've written to you and included some data about that, but we want to enter that into the record. And Mr. Tritschler, who had done a lot of the research that's available across the country on the effects of green space on economic development, has provided additional information that I'd like to make sure gets to each of you before consideration in October. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Overy. Ms. Gilly?
Terry Gilly, 1001A Richmond Road, Suite 1W. I've heard a lot of talk about driving visitation today. We have a big market segment here right now that we're not willing to take care of. The kids that come here now on group tours, you know, the 4th and 5th graders, they're all traveling with at least one adult. In fact, the ratio is almost one adult to one child. That is our future visitor. I mean, I don't know how many people you've heard say, oh, I haven't been here since my 8th grade class trip. You hear it all the time. So that is our future visitor in this group tour market. Colonial Williamsburg has had 2 years to develop a solution to the closing of Nassau Street, and our only solution is a 3-coach pull-off on South Henry Street. So if you can just close your eyes and imagine for a second the number of coaches that are going to stack up with that safety officer there. But they're going to have to stack up. It's like a recipe for disaster. If parking and restrooms speak the loudest to our visitors and their experience that they're having, then I can tell you that group tour loading and unloading in a safe environment is going to speak the loudest to the group tour market. And if we're willing to leave that market and not have it, then we should do nothing. But if we'd like to preserve it and build on it, we should take action. There are, you know, some of the things that we have thought about that, you know, maybe are a solution. I'm sure they've been shot down a million times. The P6 parking lot Can that be used April, May, and June? Can that be used in the fall? Can it be used during certain hours? It has pretty good ingress and egress off of Ireland Street and off of South Henry Street. What about the parking lot that Colonial Williamsburg has at Nassau Street and Newport Avenue that was been used for employee parking? What about Prince George Street? That has been used for parking many years ago, for not parking, I'm sorry, for loading and unloading. So Prince George Street, the lower end behind the College of Mary bookstore, was used for a long time for staging coaches, loading and unloading. So this is our passionate plea, that we take a look at this, that we don't sit idly by, letting it just come what may. We believe the future of this market is at stake. You know, hospitality, by its very definition, is the friendly and generous reception of entertainment of guests, visitors, and strangers. Tourism and hospitality business is a relationship business, and we are very passionate about it. The relationship we have with our clients are personal, and they are important. We look out for their best interests because we want to earn their repeat business. It's so easy to take care of an existing customer. It is so hard to find a new one to take their place. So we don't use the word hospitality as a slogan. We use it as a commitment to service and are proactive to ensure a phenomenal customer experience is delivered. And we hope that members of City Council will hear our plea and give us direction, which way to go. We appreciate your time and your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gilly. Would anybody else like to address council? Mr. Spangler?
Ron Spangler, Bayberry Lane, Williamsburg. I just again want to thank all of the meetings that I had with the council people and Andrew and Carolyn as well. Demographically, it is an older petition. I have got about 400 signatures already, and I would say a good 80% are not older than millennials, so spot on there. The concern I have is, and I'm against the current proposal for the Goodwin Plaza. I'm not against green space and parks, splash pools. I love them. I've got grandkids that I love to bring. They have a lot of fun with that. But it's the accountability and it's tax money, end of the day. And I know everybody's working to come to some agreement, some resolution, some compromise. And I think that's, at the end of the day, that's what everybody wants. But when I speak to the older citizens, they're vehemently against. And after meeting, with Barbara particularly, and who was the gentleman? He was here, David Trischler. Did I pronounce it? Yeah, he came. And I love to hear things. I've always loved to hire people that disagreed with me or would disagree with me and were smarter than I was, because it made me look good in my career. But I think if we just keep talking about it, I really appreciate the delay, which would allow us more time to think and you to talk to more folks and hopefully come to a conclusion that benefits the city, because that's what we all want. And I thank you for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Spangler. Anybody else? Okay, with that, we'll close the open forum. We did have something for closed session today. I think we're going to push that off to our Thursday meeting. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
Second. No. That's it? No, that's good.
Ms. Bertram?
Aye.
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 We're adjourned. We will take a brief break and reconvene.